Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for making out here so early this morning to join our distinguished lecture forum. Well, I'm very pleased to introduce you, Dr. YuYongding, as our guest speaker this morning. And I am sure we're going to have very interesting talk today. Well, I have a couple of reasons for that. First, as you see here, we have an economist from China. And he's going to speak on Chinese issue. And I think he has plenty of experiences with economic development of China in recent years. And furthermore, he has the first-hand information on what's going on in China today. So I think he has a lot of knowledge accumulated to share some of them with us. And I think we are very fortunate to have him. He is going to speak today on balancing the Chinese economy. I like this topic very much because this topic has been a critical and hot issue for many years in the international sphere, especially at the G20 summits. And many of you may remember that we had Paul Volcker last year, November, here to speak on a similar subject. His topic was then rebalancing the world economy. So I think today's talk by YuYongding will make a good company to Dr. Paul Volcker's last year's talk. Well, I think we are very fortunate to have Dr. Yu over here. And in fact, he is the first speaker from China since I joined IGE as president a couple years ago. So we have a very rare speaker today. And I think I am grateful to Dr. Ilsa Gong, who somehow lured him into Korea to speak at IGE. Well, I myself didn't know many good economists from China, so I asked him for it, and he beautifully set up this event for us today. And Dr. Yu is at the moment an academician at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and he also the president of China Society of World Economics. Up until very lately, he was the Director General at the Institute of World Economics and Politics in China. I was told that he worked for this institute for 12 years. And last night when I had dinner with him, I was surprised that before he started his economic study, he worked for 10 years in some factory as a labor worker during the Cultural Revolution. And without any regular college work, she went to England. Somebody was very impressed by his hard working and English and many other things. The English scholar invited him to study at the Oxford University. So he has a very, very rare quality among economists. Unusual, but has a good, I think, experience in many aspects. Well, now let me present him to you. And please join me in welcoming him.
As you know, Chinese economy now is the second largest in the world. And Chinese economy has been growing very fast for 30 years, even though many Chinese are complaining about the problems we are facing. But really, this is a miracle. Only in 30 years, and Chinese economy has changed so dramatically. Recently, I had the opportunity to go to Japan, to travel quite widely, to make comparison. Fortunately, I was able to be together with Professor Cho in Tokyo. And anyway, I make some comparison, and I really found that in terms of wealth, China really is catching up. In China, we have so many big cities and so many high buildings and so on. Compared with Japan, I think China, in many aspects, are richer. I was surprised by this finding. But really, I mean, China has been quite successful, and China's growth is a miracle. However, China's growth is, as seen by Premier Wen Jiabao, unstable, unbalanced, uncoordinated, and ultimately unsustainable. So China must rebalance its economy. Otherwise, in the next 10 or 20 years, China's growth will be stalled. And that will be something very bad for China as well as to the rest of the world. And so in this presentation, I will concentrate on just one issue, that is China's imbalances. We are facing lots of problems, and imbalances is just one of the most important challenges we are facing. Besides these imbalances, we are facing problems such as lack of ability of innovation creation, and serious pollution, wasteful use of resources, widening gap between rich and people, and insufficiency in provision of social goods and so on. We are facing lots of challenges. So while we are very proud of our achievement, we are also worried about the sustainability of China's growth. Let me talk about these Chinese imbalances. For lots of Western scholars, China's imbalance means running current account surplus. But for most Chinese economists, when we are talking about the imbalances, we mean twin surpluses. That is current account surplus and capital account surplus. And from this figure, you can see that since later 80s, China has been running current account surplus. Only in 1993, China suffered from a current account deficit. In other years, we have been running current account surplus. And actually, since the opening up, and except for a few years, China has been running capital account surplus almost all the time, 30 years and 20 years, and so on. So twin surpluses is the most important characteristic of China's imbalances, not just current account surplus. And last year, China's international balance payment of surplus is more than 470 billion US dollars. And China's current account surplus last year is something like 100 billion, lower than many years before. But China's capital account surplus is huge last year. And I think so far this year, China has a capital account surplus something like 130 billion US dollars. So capital inflow is also very important for China. China's pattern of international balance payments actually is quite unusual compared with other countries. For example, this is Thailand's current account and capital account surplus. This is quite typical for a developing country. That is, for developing country, the most common pattern is running current account deficit. For example, in Thailand, they have been running current account deficit for almost 30 years before Asian financial crisis. While you are running current account deficit, you run capital account surplus. That's very usual for developing country because lack of saving, because lack of foreign exchange reserves, you need to borrow foreign resources to finance your goals. So while you are running current account deficit, you must run capital account surplus. China is different. And this is another example. This is Japan's current account capital account pattern. Japan has been running current account surplus for many, many years, so more than 3 decades. But at the same time, Japan has been running capital account deficit because Japan is a high saving country. They export capital while running capital account, while running current account surplus. This is also a very normal, rational pattern of balance payment. So what is the essence of a China's twin surplus? From this figure, you can see that. And on the one hand, China export lots of goods to United States. So U.S. pay China for those current account, trade account deficit. Then, at the same time, U.S. invests in China quite heavily. And not just U.S., I mean developed countries. So you can see from this figure, money flow into China via 2 channels. One is FDI, another is paying for China's export to their country. And so essentially, China has been recycling all those money back to creditor. So as a result of these twin surpluses, China accumulates a huge foreign exchange reserves. Accumulating foreign exchange reserves means that you are invest in U.S. You channel all the money which flow in China back to creditors and so on. And eventually you are creditor. And China is a very poor country. But actually China has been a capital exporting country for more than 20 years. That is something many Western economists pay little attention to. Is anything wrong with these twin surpluses? What is the welfare implication of this kind of pattern of international balance payments? I summarize this as 3 problems. I call them Dombush problem, Williamson problem, Krugman problem, and Rogoff problem. And many years ago, Professor Dombush pointed out that a developing country should not buy treasuries from the United States because developing country should use resources for domestic consumption and domestic investment because return is much higher. So to buy treasuries and instead to use money for domestic consumption and investment is a misallocation of resources. And second one is Williamson problem. Professor Williamson gave a speech in Reserve Bank of India in 1995. He pointed out if you are a capital receiving country, then you should translate these capital inflows into current account deficit. You receive money from developed countries, then you use this money to buy products, buy goods, technology, managerial skills, rather than use money to buy treasury bills. And China failed to translate capital inflows into current account deficit. This is also an important symptom of misallocation of resources. The third one is Krugman problem. This is a rather recent problem because China has accumulated so much foreign exchange reserves, mainly in the form of treasuries. And U.S. economy is suffering, and U.S. is in serious trouble in managing their fiscal position. U.S. is accumulating foreign exchange, accumulating debts, and so the possibility for U.S. dollar to devalue is very strong. actually, Krugman argued very strongly, Federal Reserve should somehow create inflation, should devalue U.S. dollar somehow, and so that they can get rid of their debt burden. Krugman said that China has fallen into a dollar trap, and so because devaluation of U.S. dollar, China will suffer a great capital losses. So actually, we have been suffering a great capital losses, and because U.S. Devaluation of U.S. dollar. The last one is Rock problem. Rock pointed out that if a country suffers a serious budget deficit, if the debt burden for a country is huge, then the temptation for this country to inflate away their debt burden will become irresistible. So we are facing this situation because the debt burden for U.S. has become nearly unbearable for U.S. So the temptation for U.S. government to inflate away their debt burden will become stronger and stronger. This has not happened yet, but if it happens, then what will be the purchasing power of China's saving in the form of treasuries, U.S. government securities? And so China will suffer greatly. This is something we must be very worried about. So to run twin surplus is not in the interest for China. And so China should do something. Then how to reduce these twin surpluses? In order to do so, you have to analyze the causes of these twin surplus, these imbalances. Usually, we use this formula to analyze the causes of China's twin surpluses. This is a very simple identity. Saving minus investment should be equal to current surplus. If a country has, if a country's saving is greater than the country's investment, then this country must run current surplus. And so most economists will use this identity to analyze the cause of China's twin surpluses. And basically, there are two schools of thought. One school emphasizes importance gap between saving and investment. Why China running current surplus? Very simple, because China is a high saving country. The saving in China is higher than investment in China. So China must run current surplus. This is one explanation. Another school of thought is different. They emphasize the importance of the right-hand side of this equation, because this is identity, not causality, right? And so some people said, why China running current surplus? Because there's something rightly, wrongly, it has something to do with China's trade promotion policy. You have a weak currency. You have lots of favorable policies toward exporting industries. Then it's very natural those industries will run current surplus. And just because you run current surplus, very naturally, by certain mechanism, you have a higher saving than your investment. So both way, both explanation has some logical foundation. So which explanation is correct? I think it depends on a specific situation. And you need to check China's reality. Then you can decide whether should we use the right side hand of the equation to explain the left-hand side of the equation or other way around. And for those, I label these two schools of thinking as structural school and policy school. For structural schools, and their diagnosis about China's high saving, including a lack of a social safety net in China, because there isn't a very there isn't really, especially in countryside and so on. Years ago, not right now. Now the situation changed a little bit. Because the lack of social safety net, households have to save because they have to worry about their future. Then another very important reason for China's high saving is very high enterprise saving. In China, there are lots of state-owned enterprises. For 2 decades, almost 2 decades, those state-owned enterprises will not hand in their profits to state. That phenomenon is quite unusual. State-owned enterprises keep all the profits within the industries. Something very wrong, but this has been corrected recently. Then there are also other reasons, such as China's age structure, and also the widening gap between rich and poor is also a contributing factor to this high saving. And so I will not elaborate. There are other counter-arguments against this argument of high explanation of high saving. Some people said China's saving is high, but not exceptionally high. As share for GDP, China's corporate saving at best rivals Japan's. Its household saving is below India's, and its government saving is less than Korean's. I don't know whether this is true with regard to Korea. Maybe now has changed recently. Anyway, there are some statistics making comparisons between different countries about the share of the saving. This is China. From this figure, you can see that in recent years, the share of the government in saving has been increased quite significantly. And also corporate saving, the share of corporate saving in total saving has been really quite high in early 2000s. But in recent years, and I think the pattern is quite stable. Household saving is high, but the corporate saving is in recent years has been reduced a little bit. But anyway, I can't see a very clear pattern about this. Then compared with other countries, China's characteristic in terms of the share of the savings can be seen more clearly. Here, compared with the Korean, and China's house saving, the share of China's house saving is greater, quite much greater than Korea's. But China's household saving is less than India's, and so on and so forth. But this is not my emphasis. What I'm trying to introduce is the opinion of the policy school on the causes of twin surpluses. And why there's twin surpluses? One of very important explanation is that China's financial market is problematic. Why I'm saying so? I can give you one example. For example, there's an enterprise which want to borrow something to buy some capital equipment. And also this enterprise knows that in a neighboring province, there's a factory which produces the capital good machine. This enterprise want to buy. You can buy this. For example, I have a factory in Shanghai. I know in Guangzhou there's some equipment I can buy. And then usually you will borrow money from banks. Then you get money, then you buy this equipment. That's all. Finished, right? But in China, because underdevelopment of financial market, these enterprises in Shanghai cannot get money from banks. But in China, there's a preferential policy towards FDI. So this factory in Shanghai, instead of trying to get money from Chinese banks, they introduce foreign capital. For example, a Hong Kongese invest in these Shanghai enterprises, for example, $1 billion. This Shanghai factory does not need this, say, $1 million. They want 8 million RMB. So they sell this $1 million to People's Bank of China, and to get the 800 million yuan, then they use these 800 million yuan to buy equipment from Guangzhou. So as a result of this practice, and we end up with the 100 million 100 million US dollar for exchange reserves, because People's Bank of China has to invest this 100 million US dollar get from enterprise in Shanghai. They have to use this 100 million to buy treasuries. So this is the one important cause why China has been accumulate for exchange reserves. Why China has to run capital account surplus, because we don't need this foreign capital inflow. If China's financial market is running normally, we have high saving, we have money. But the trouble is the enterprise cannot get money. They have to get money wrong way around, and they have to wire U.S. capital market to get the 800 million yuan for purchasing capital goods in other place in China, right? Another very important reason is policy-led market distortion. For example, preferential policy towards FDI. I will talk about this a little bit later. And also export promotion policies, weak currency, tax rebate. For now, situation has been improved. But many years ago, for some enterprises, they produce products not for earning foreign exchange reserve. They produce products just for earning tax rebate. Lots of problems, and so it causes twin surpluses. And also in China, local governments play a very important role in promoting economic development and so on. So lots of local governments are competing with each other to offer very good conditions for FDI and so on. Okay. Anyway, so these are explanation from the aspect of policies. So the implication of this diagnosis of a policy school on cause of twin surplus is that China need to make correction on their trade promotion policy, on their FDI attraction policy. Otherwise, China will continue to run twin surpluses. So I think both arguments have their grounds. So for the government, you have to listen to two schools of thoughts, try to introduce comprehensive policies to tackle the problem from both sides of this equation. Some policies should be directed to reduce this saving gap. Some other policies should be directed to reduce trade surplus directly, not indirectly. So perhaps I can talk a little about China's FDI policy and the evolution of these policies. And for many years, for decades until recently, and foreign enterprises have been given supranational treatments. But on the other hand, there are some sub-supranational treatment also. But I will not talk about this here. But anyway, so for many years, foreign enterprises will enjoy lots of privilege, income tax exemption, reduction, tariff exemption, reduction, value-added tax rebate, preferential loans, and so on and so forth. And especially for lots of local governments, they will provide lots of hidden subsidies. I have a student who is head of a certain economic zone in Beijing. He told me that they are inviting some Western, big Western corporation to invest in their region. And according to Chinese government laws and regulation, they have to charge rents for these foreign investors. They invest in this region. And for example, for 1 square meter land, the foreign investor has to pay certain amount of money. Yes, they collect this money duly. But at the same time, they try somehow to return this money to foreign investors somehow in some way. So because all these policies and attraction for foreign investors to invest in China is quite high. And my view is that we should attract foreign investment, but the emphasis should be on the improvement of so-called software. You should have a very good regulation. You should provide good services, so forth. Not just simply give away lots of taxes and the fees and so on. That is not good for the sustainability of investment in China. Anyway, there are lots of these kind of policies. So FDI inflow is not entirely in line with the demand supply, entirely in line with the market fundamentals. There are some artificial stimulus, artificial incentive. That is not very good for long run, not good for the sustainability of capital inflows. So as a result of these sort of preferential policies, there is a very important phenomenon in China. That's crowding out by FDI. As I mentioned, China is high saving country, right? But as high saving country, why you are still attracting so much foreign FDI? And why you are running twin surplus? This is one example, explanation. Let me explain this. Assume that, initially, China's saving and investment is equal. For example, this figure, this horizontal line representing investment, this representing return of investment, each bar representing a certain project, certain investment, right? So there are different investment opportunities in different projects. This is a very high, there is very high return. Here, the return of investment is relatively low. Suppose China's saving is AS, and China's investment is also AS. In this case, there will be no trade surplus because the saving is equal to investment. Assume this initial condition. Because China's preferential policies and so on, and lots of foreign firms have got opportunity to invest in high return projects. From here to here, A to B, these projects, with a higher return, the opportunity was given to foreign firms. So because you have saving A and S, and because foreign firms occupy this investment opportunity, A to B. So you have actual resources. So these actual resources actually, how can you do? Here, there are some investment opportunities left for Chinese firms. So Chinese firms were able to invest this much. Because you invest only this much, and you have actual resources as here. You have actual resources. And then these actual resources become trade surplus. Then you use this trade surplus to invest in treasuries. The investment return of this invest is 3%, treasury bills and so on. The investment return for FDI, according to IMF, is 22% in 2008. According to Conference Board, average investment return for U.S. firm is 33%. So U.S. firms invest in China, they get 33% return average. And China's investment return is 3%. So in China, even though there's very high return of projects, 33%, you fail to get this project. You cannot invest here. So what can you do? You just export. Then you invest in U.S. treasuries. this is the situation. Why I'm saying this bad is pattern for China? Why China should try to rebalancing your economy? Just because this is a very typical misallocation of resources. I hope I have made this very clear. Okay. Another very important reason why China is running current account surplus. Why now China's current account surplus has become more and more structural. Previously, this is a result of policies. But now it's become structural because after 30 years, after 20 years, and there's some specific pattern of China's export industries. And here you can see that foreign funded enterprise in China, they dominate China's trade export. More than 60% of China's export actually come from foreign funded enterprises. And so, and also in China, when you are talking about the general trade, China is suffering from deficit. And why China has been running current surplus, trade surplus, mainly because China's processing trade is very important. The share of processing trade in China's export is more than 60%. 6 to 70%. So you have very large processing trade in China. And this processing trade, by definition, will run current account surplus because processing. You import, there's a value added, you export. So by definition, you have a current account trade surplus. So if the share of the processing trade in China is very high, so definitely China's current account surplus, trade surplus will be very high. So this structural problem. So this problem can't be solved in short time, even by appreciation of yen and so on and so forth. You cannot change this trade pattern over time. So as I mentioned, because we know the problems of twin surpluses, we know twin surplus is a reflection of misallocation resources in China. So Chinese government has taken measures try to rebalance the Chinese economy. These are some measures we have been taken since 2003 and 4 and so on. Number one is to appreciate RMB starting from 2005 gradually. And a reduction of tax rebate also very important. In China, tax rebate is 13%, quite high. And now we are reducing this. And we also dismantle policy of self-rebalancing. Previously, all FDI enterprises were required to maintain self-balancing. If you use certain amount of foreign exchanges, you have to earn this foreign exchange yourself. If you fail to meet this requirement, then you will not be allowed to invest in China. But all these policies has been dismantled already. And also recently, Chinese government started to talk about cultivate the ability of innovation creation by indigenous Chinese firms and so on. And this is the policy aimed at to give Chinese firms national treatment. Chinese firms, in many aspects, fail to get national treatment. And so these are policies. And another very important change is happening in the right-hand side of this identity. I mean, in China, there are lots of changes recently. For example, wage increases are very strong. Because this, definitely, China's saving gap will be reduced. And also, government now has paid great attention to the improvement of social security system. And as a result of this improvement, Chinese citizens will be more happy to spend their money. So this is why lots of Chinese are traveling around the world. And lots of Chinese are sending their children abroad. And also lots of low-income family, because of increase in the wages, they increase their expenditures. And so this is very important. And also, government has started to spend much more money in education and R&D and so on. And also, since 2009, as a response to global financial crisis, Chinese government increased investment in infrastructures and environment protection. These are very important. And so even China's investment rate is very high, but because China is such a big country, opportunities for further investment still plentiful. For example, there's lots of opportunities for investment in environment protection and investment in, say, water preservation. Give you one example. Beijing has been suffering from shortage of water for many decades. And 30 years ago, if you want to find water, you just dig 3 meters in Beijing, you can find water. Now you have to dig a well as deep as 300 meters, then you can find water. Situation very bad. But at the same time in Beijing, we have 60 golf courses, 60. We have 17 skiing courses in Beijing. There's no snow. We create snow by pumping up water, create artificial snow. So we have 17 skiing courses, 60 golf courses. You know, golf course, you use a huge amount of water. This is very much misallocation resources. We have to make correction on those. And there are lots of examples which shows that there's still opportunities for China to invest domestically. By investing domestically, we will reduce the gap between saving and investment. And this will also help China to correct its balance of payment. So as a result of these policies, what is the result of the rebalancing? Here you can see some results. And Chinese economy was very much imbalanced in, say, in 2005, 2006, and so on. Later on, China's current account balance has been reduced, especially in 2009. This is not entirely because China's domestic policy. This, to a very large extent, is the result of a global recession. We can't sell our products. So naturally, the balance of the current account surplus reduced. But anyway, since the recovery global economy, though China's current account surplus has been increasing again, but the speed of increase has been dropping very significantly. Last year, China's current account surplus is just $100 billion, just 100 billion US billion. In 2006, it's something like 400 billion. So there's a big drop. And this year, and current account surplus more or less will be the same as last year, maybe a little bit higher than last year. But the growth rate of the current account surplus has been reduced quite significantly. So the trend is toward rebalancing. But I would not say that we have been very successful in rebalancing the economy. There's still a long way to go. And, but more worrying is capital inflows. In recent years, as a result of a global recession, as a result of problems in Europe and the United States, lots of capital has been pouring into China. And so far this year, capital account surplus should be something like 130 billion US dollars. I don't have a precise figure, but it's very big. You see, in 90s, in early 2000, on average, capital inflows into China is something like 60 billion US dollars. Now it's more than 100 billion US dollars. And also, I'm expecting there will be more capital inflows into China. So it causes lots of problems. We don't need capital. We have enough saving. We don't know how to use our own saving. But at the same time, there are so many foreign savings pour into China. How to deal with this? Because capital inflows, because current account surplus, and China's accumulation for exchange reserve has been increased steadily since last year. And because global financial crisis, for a few months, quarters, the increase in foreign exchange reserves has been reduced. But since the third quarter of last year, China's accumulation of foreign exchange reserve increased quite dramatically. From this figure, you can see very dramatically. And it caused problems. So we have been reduced current account surplus by introducing lots of new policies aimed at correcting imbalances, which is not very successful, but we have achieved some result. But on the other hand, capital inflows is very strong. So as I just mentioned, China's imbalances mean twin surplus. China should reduce current account surplus as well as capital account surplus. And now we have been successful, but successful in a very limited way. Now we are debating two very serious problems recently. One is about the RMB exchange rate policy. There has been a very heated debate. Another one is RMB internationalization. And for many years, lots of Chinese government officials and economists argue that Chinese, RMB is not undervalued. And this is argument one. Argument two is that even if there's appreciation of RMB, China's trade surplus will not be reduced because China's trade surplus is structural and not related with the exchange rate policy. These are two main arguments. The counter-argument is that RMB is indeed undervalued. We should allow RMB to appreciate, even though we don't know by how much RMB should be revalued. Number two, we believe that China's export and import will react to the change of exchange rate, even though perhaps the elasticity is not extremely high, but there is electricity. So we should allow RMB to appreciate. These are two different camps within China. Now I think the focus has changed a little bit. Put aside whether RMB is undervalued, whether appreciation of RMB will be effective for rebalancing. Put aside these two questions. Just think about the harmful effect of further accumulation of foreign exchange reserves. Because if you don't allow RMB to appreciate, you have to intervene continuously in foreign exchange market. You have to buy up all extra US dollars. And what can we do with these extra US dollars? You have to invest in treasury bills and so on and so forth. So if you continue to intervene in foreign exchange market, inevitably you will have more foreign exchange reserves, especially US government bonds, US government securities, and so on. And as we mentioned, due to Krugman Problem, due to Roth Problem, if you further accumulate foreign exchange reserves, you will suffer great losses now and in the future. So People's Bank of China is facing a very difficult choice. Intervene or not intervene. If you stop intervene, we will stop further accumulation of foreign exchange reserves. But it may have some negative impact on China's exporting industries, have some negative impact on employment. But if you continue to intervene, you actually throw China's resources into the Pacific Atlantic. You export, you get some ionium greenbacks, but those greenbacks will devalue. You can't buy many things. For example, in 2003, when we started whether we should allow RMB to appreciate, at the time, the price of oil is 30 US dollar. The price of gold is 500 US dollar. Now the price of gold is 1,700 US dollar. Price of oil, though now dropped, is still something like 100 US dollar. So from 2003 to 2011, China's foreign exchange reserve has increased more than 7 times. 7 times, more than 7 times. But the purchasing power of China's the foreign exchange reserves, if you want to cash out, want to spend this money, will not change very much. Which means the result of your hard work actually already down the drain. We should not continue to do these kind of stupid things. You lend money to U.S. and U.S. will not agree for your lending. They will, actually, Krugman accused China to lend money to United States, cause problem in United States. For Chinese, it's not very fair. But for me, yes, it's not fair. But U.S. did not force you to lend money to them. So you have to make correction. So this is why I argue that China should stop somehow, as soon as possible, intervention in foreign exchange market to allow RMB to flow. But of course, we should really to prepare for this, and otherwise it will have some problem. For example, if we fail to manage the cross-border capital flows, then it will cause overshooting. It will cause problems and so on. But this is another issue. Because it's difficult to get consensus about RMB exchange rate policy. So Chinese central bank and lots of economists shift their focus from debating on RMB exchange rate policy to RMB internationalization. The aim of RMB internationalization actually are mainly three. One is to reduce the exchange rate risk and for Chinese enterprises. Two is to reduce the accumulation of foreign exchange reserves. Three is to improve the competitiveness of Chinese financial organizations and so on, to make Shanghai international financial center, maybe compete with the Korean and other centers or potential centers. But anyway, these are three major objectives of RMB internationalization. But after a year of implementing RMB internationalization, we found there's some problems with this approach. Because China's RMB's internationalization is started from using RMB as a settlement currency in trade between mainland China and Hong Kong. And the thing is that we assume that without allow Hongkongese people in Hong Kong to get RMB, then there will be no chance for them to use RMB to buy Chinese exports. There will be no way to encourage the wider use of RMB as settlement currency. This is the logic. We thought we encouraged the use of RMB as a settlement currency for importing Chinese goods from encourage Hong Kongese to encourage Hong Kongese accept RMB as a payment for Hong Kongese export to mainland China. So Hong Kongese can get more RMB. Then they will use this RMB to buy Chinese export to Hong Kong. Then RMB will be used both in China's export and China's import. This is the theory. But the trouble is that currently we pay Hong Kongese export to mainland China with RMB. Okay, so they get lots of RMB recently, but they fail. They will not be able to use this RMB to buy Chinese products. As a result of this RMB internationalization, instead of reducing foreign exchange reserves, we increase foreign exchange reserve. That's very simple. For example, we have 100 million, actually, we have a 1 trillion export. Okay? At the same time, we have something like 800 billion imports. So we earn 1 trillion, we spend 800 billion. There's 200 billion left as an increase in foreign exchange reserve. But now because use of RMB as a settlement currency, we still earn 1 trillion US dollars as a result of export. But we will not use 800 billion US dollar for payment for imports. So we have 1 trillion US dollar as foreign exchange reserves, not compared with before. Previously, we have just 200 billion US dollar. Because we just earn US dollar, we cannot spend US dollar. So of course, you have more US dollars. So this practice actually is counterproductive. It's just against our original purpose. So which shows that there are some problems with the roadmap of RMB internationalization. We should encourage, say, to use RMB as an invoicing currency, not just settlement currency. We perhaps should not just think about use RMB in trade. We should think about to use RMB in capital flows. For example, encourage foreigners to issue pound bonds, so on and so forth. Anyway, to cut it short, we found some problems with the current practice of promoting RMB internationalization. We should rethink our approach. But eventually, I mean, the basic conclusion is that China needs to really tackle imbalances head on, not the roundabout way. If you use this roundabout way, there will be some unexpected result, which may be counterproductive, which may be just, I mean, lead to opposite result of against your original intention. So due to time constraint, I think I can summarize the main points of my presentation. Before going to that, there's one point I want to mention. U.S. blame China for global imbalances. That is not fair. From this figure, you can see that the imbalances, global imbalances, contributed by China is quite limited here. China's current account surplus. Compared with the global imbalance, China is just a small part of the problem, not the entire part of the problem. So it's entirely unfair for U.S. to blame China. But from China's point of view, as I mentioned, twin surplus is not in the interest of China. No matter what U.S. say or not say, China should do something to reduce these imbalances, both for the interest of China and for the interest of the rest of the global economy. Lastly, I would like to give you one message. China's economic situation so far is good, even though we are facing lots of problems. But according to past experience, China always managed to motoring through. Before 1995, I was quite pessimistic about China's economic growth. I always make prediction about something will go wrong. There will be fall of Chinese economy and so on and so forth. Then each time I was failed. I discredited myself by making these kind of predictions. Starting from 1995, I changed my position. I become more optimistic about Chinese economy. Each time, for example, in 1998, and there's a cover story in Economist, the fall of Chinese economy, and so on and so forth. I said, that's rubbish. Chinese economy will survive. And since then, each time I'm right. So I increase my reputation. So to be modestly optimistic is the right approach. This is my experience towards Chinese economy. And this year, China's growth rate will be something like 9%. China's inflation will be under control, not far away from it.
I think that China now represents 20% of world population and 8% of world GDP and 8% of world trade. And furthermore, China takes about 25% of Korean exports, which is greater than combined Korean exports to the U.S. and Japan. And more importantly, as Dr. Yu said, China has been an engine of growth of the world economy at the moment, and I think according to his theory, it will go on like that for a while, and the economic performance was undeterred by the recent financial crisis, thanks to Chinese very thoughtful combination of fiscal and monetary policies. And I think China's sheer size of economy now have great influences over all over the world, including Korea, depending upon whatever policy choices they are making today. So now I think that YuYongding, Dr. Yu mentioned that China's focus is shifting from exchange rate adjustment to internationalization of China's yuan currency, which means a little bit conflicting, because without lifting of the convertibility of restriction on the convertibility of Chinese yuan and capital flows, full guarantee, free movements, and maybe very difficult to move to internationalization of Chinese RMB. Actually, to make a key currency, it's a double-edged business. One, you have to be allow freely free market for foreign exchange. At the same time, you have to be ready to supply yuan as much as foreigners want to keep as store value or for whatever reasons. So it may take time, but we may expect that China will take a greater role in a constructive way to make the world a little bit more easier. Well, now time is short, so I will shift to Q&A, comment and questions. Since we have very short time, please limit your question or comments in 1 minute, please.
Big favor, always, Dr. Yu, and I'm reading in various occasions of your articles and comments. First of all, I agree with you that China should have a more flexible exchange rate scheme and least intervention of PBOC into your foreign exchange market. But if we think back in the case of 2007 and 2008, in between, China has appreciated during 3 years, as long as I know, almost a 20% appreciation. But it brought some of huge impact on exportation, especially in the area of Guangdong, and some low value aided exportation. Therefore, China, you took again depegging vis-a-vis US dollar and so on. And it's still kept on in that way. My guessing is that if China follows your advice, such as more flexible exchange rate and leave appreciation of yuan, then most of the impact will be on exportation field, whether it's more processing industries, and some of pure Chinese export is a small portion. But as a whole, the export will be greatly impacted by this sort of exchange rate adjustment. So you haven't mentioned the impact of the decrease of export. China, you have such a suffering of employment problems is a rather political issue, not only economic. So in that sense, how do you suggest for PBOC or your monetary authority to take to support of export. You have mentioned some of FDI enterprise and the tax incentives, these sort of things, but the impact on export in any cases will be very huge and big. So would you give me the answer? Thank you.
For Chinese government, because we worry about the impact, negative impact on China's export and the impact on employment. So this is why the Chinese government has been very, very cautious about RMB appreciation. So you are right, your worry is correct. But the trouble is that we don't know how big will be the impact. There is a risk. The question is whether this risk is worth to take compared with the cost that we have to pay. And also, we did some investigation, field studies, and lots of enterprises, exporting enterprises, are complaining uncertainty in RMB exchange rate. They thought if a government allow RMB to appreciate, for example, in Wango and so on, there will be no uncertainty. Then they will be very comfortable with the negotiation with the foreign counterpart, and they cannot shift the cost of appreciation to their foreign counterpart, and so they have been suffering. This is the opinions of lots of enterprises, but because we don't have a model, we don't have a very solid foundation to quantify the specific impact of a certain appreciation on China's export-import. And so perhaps we have to take some risk. And also, years ago, we worried about the impact on employment, and it will cause problems. But the thing is that this has changed quite greatly. The shortage of labor become a very serious problem. In coastal areas, lots of enterprises fail to find adequate laborers. So this is no longer a very important worry for the Chinese leadership. So perhaps this is the opportunity. And also because China is suffering from inflation. Inflation is the #1 target for Chinese government policy to control inflation. So this perhaps is again a good opportunity for People's Bank China to stop intervention or at least reduce intervention. And also we started the experience of other countries. For a certain period of time, export-import will be impacted. But in longer run, and the basic pattern of this trade surplus and deficit may not be so serious. For example, Japan and Korea and so on. So the problem for China is worried too much about the negative impact of foreign exchange, the RMB appreciation, and also we fail to worry adequately about the downside of this policy of not allowing RMB to be more flexible.
Comprehensive updates on the state of the Chinese economy. I found your hypothesis about crowding out of domestic investment by foreign direct investment very intriguing. What is the share of FDI in your the physical total investment in China? That's my one technical question. And secondly, that imbalance between foreign direct investment and Chinese domestic investment is apparently due to various preferential treatment that are given to FDI, I assume. And I wonder if you are doing anything in order to correct that imbalance in terms of the preferences given to foreign and domestic investment. And then I now come to my major point, which is that, first of all, the fact that you have twin surpluses is a prima facie evidence that your currency is being undervalued by policy intervention. And secondly, your story of what is happening in China and to the debate on renminbi reminds me of the experiences that Korea has had since the mid-1980s, when we suddenly began to have, for the first time in our modern history, have huge surpluses on the trade account, which brought pressure from the United States for us to revalue our currency and open up our market. And then Korean government, and I was part of that in that regard, was inventing various the reasons why we should not appreciate. Now, looking back upon those experiences, I think that basically, the U.S. position or advice for us to appreciate the currency was right. Because while we resisted appreciation, we began to have domestic inflation, labor wage and labor market explosions, the explosion of social demand for welfare, which interacted with the political sphere to have huge political consequences. So we began floating the Korean currency. And then at some point in the mid-1990s, we began to again peg the Korean currency to effectively speaking, to US dollar. And then that was one reason why we ended up with the financial crisis in the late 1990s. So I think on the overall, you should look at the argument of whether China should rebalance or not, or revalue or not. You should look at it from the viewpoint of your pure domestic national interest. And I believe that once you do so, you will come up with the broad conclusion that you have to appreciate your currency. And that finally takes me to a point raised by Chairman Professor Nam. What is the relationship? Why you made a presentation as though renminbi internationalization would be an alternative option to currency appreciation. Is there such a logical connection between the two?
I think I make some comments about RMB exchange rate appreciation and internationalization. I don't think there's some logical connections. I don't think RMB internationalization should be or can be a replacement of RMB exchange rate flexibility. So I entirely agree with you. Actually, I have problems with the current approach of China's RMB internationalization. I think we can't achieve the objectives. I mean, we suppose by RMB internationalization, we can reduce exchange rate risk for Chinese enterprises. We can reduce the accumulation for exchange reserves and so on. I don't think we can achieve these objectives. So in this regard, I agree with you. This is also my problem, raised to those who argue for internationalization of RMB. And you also make a very strong case for flexibility of exchange rate policy, exchange rate. I entirely agree with you. I hope you can talk with the Chinese experts, economists, and Chinese officials to introduce your experience. That's very important because Chinese leadership is very pragmatic. They are very skillful in managing the economy, in knowing the reality and so on. They don't want to listen too much to the rubbish given by economists. So if you can talk about the issue based on current experiences, you get their ears. I think that will be very helpful. I agree with you. And as for FDI, the trouble is we don't have a very precise statistic about this. Many years ago, I had an argument with the Minister of Commerce about FDI. I say in Japan, in Korea, in early time, they don't welcome FDI and so on. They have very strict control about this. And in China, we have too much FDI and so on. It's not good for China. Then the Vice Minister of Commerce at the time told me, what is your figure about China's FDI stock? He asked me this question. Then I say something, the figure was given by Minister of Commerce. Then he says, wrong. This figure had been adjusted. So immediately he reduced this by half. So I lost my argument because I don't have a figure. So this is a very important issue for China. I think FDI stock in China is more than 1.3 trillion. This is very rough estimation. We don't have the precise figures. And the share of FDI it has been various, and sometimes 10% of total investment, sometimes 10%, even higher than 10%. I think in Korea it's much lower. It's much lower, and in China it's much higher than. And also China's current account surplus is on average is 4 or 3% of GDP. Of course, in 2006 it's very high, more than 10% of GDP current account surplus. But usually it's not that big. So to a certain extent, I think this crowding out can explain to a certain extent, partially to China's current account surplus. Definitely not entirely. We still need to do some mathematics, statistics to quantify what is the contribution of this crowding out to China's IPI. And so far, I can't give you a precise answer. But your question is legitimate, and this is just a sort of a hypothesis, not really accepted conclusion. And we are doing research on this in this direction and currently.
Dr. Yu, 谢谢你. Thank you for your pertinent, useful, and excellent lecture presentation. Allow me to ask you a layman's question. My name is Yi Sang-sol. Li is my family name. Okay. How do you consider China's living standard and happiness index of common, ordinary people? To what extent they were improved as a result of rebalanced China's economy, in your view? Okay. Is it safe and profitable to invest in China by the Korean businessman? I would appreciate your brief answer.
I think it's very obvious the living standards in China have been improved dramatically. It's very obvious. And 30 years ago, you see no cars, very few cars, and so on. Now, this traffic jam make you very unhappy. You can't drive and so on. So, and as I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention, and I travel in Japan. I make comparison. Yes, Japan's living conditions in city areas compared with China is much poor. Poor. Yes, I was surprised, but that is a fact. I have a friend and famous intellectuals in Japan. I visit his home, and I found he's very modest in Chinese standard. And just at my standard, my standard is very low in China. You talk with Fang Gang and others, and Chinese living standard really improved dramatically. But on the other hand, we must admit that the gap between rich poor has been widening. And so, if you ask whether Chinese are happier, I don't know. Maybe I can guarantee they are 10 times richer, but I can't guarantee they are much more happier. During Cultural Revolution, really, when I was a worker, I felt many workers were very happy, very happy. I think you know this. I believe that North Korean people may be very happy, right? So that's two different things. And lastly, I believe that to invest in China is a safe bet. Safe, quite good. Of course, you may prepare to run away, but at least here at this moment to invest, you get a huge profit. I believe that, and. As with regard to the impact or improvement of rebalancing on Chinese living standards and so on, to be honest, I cannot see a direct impact. If there is a direct impact, maybe negative. What I'm talking about is the future. For example, we accumulating foreign exchange reserves, and it's still there. It's still 3.2 trillion, right? Unless U.S. default. And we still have 3.2 trillion. My question is, when we are going to use it 30 years later, how much that's worth it? That's our problem. So if you're just concerned about current situation, you have no need to worry about the imbalances and so on.
I have just a humble question. It may sound ridiculous or somewhat foolish, but to make your RMB more internationalized, I think that the more people have RMB in their households or business, the faster the RMB internationalization will become. And then, for example, in my company, I'm dealing with trade with U.S. currency, not by RMB. So that, what do you think if I suggest that if your government, Chinese government, offer foreign banks or foreign government to give the people the opportunity or favor when they want to exchange their dollars with RMB in their households or in their private entities. In that case, the more people will get RMB in their bank accounts, there will be more internationalization of RMB currency in the world. What are your comments?
The relationship between RMB internationalization and the liberalization of capital account, I entirely agree with Professor Nam. Capital account liberalization is a precondition for internationalization of RMB. Or these two things should go side by side. In Japan, yen internationalization means liberalization of capital account liberalization. The same, actually. When you read that document, they are saying internationalization of yen, but you read the contents, then you found this is about liberalization of capital account. So in China, I agree that without this, without the liberalization of capital account, without the flexibility of RMB, then it's impossible for internationalization of yen. If you want to use internationalization of yuan to replace capital account liberalization and flexibility of RMB, then it will fail. This is my position. You can do something. So far, we encourage the use of RMB as settlement currency, which actually is a very small step in line with the capital account liberalization. Because previously you are not allowed to use RMB to settle your trade, but now you are allowed if you want. So this is internationalization. But because you have to follow up in other steps, and then if you don't, then you stop here. You can't further promote. And at most, you can satisfy some motivations, desire for speculation, because RMB is appreciated. And so, of course, lots of people want to use RMB because if you hold RMB, then there'll be appreciation. But after appreciation, you may sell RMB to change it back to US dollar and so on and so on. So this RMB internationalization will be reversed very quickly. So appreciation expectations are not the foundation for internationalization of RMB. The foundation is strong economy, credibility of the economy, capital account liberalization, and flexibility of exchange rate. These are the key.
I'm very curious, what kind of policy measures does the Chinese government prepare for it? And do you think whether it will succeed and when it will come? That's my question. Thank you.
Allow Chinese enterprises to use RMB for trade settlement. And second important thing is to allow non-residents in Hong Kong to use RMB to buy some Chinese financial products. So far, still limited. Recently, Ministry of Finance issued RMB bonds in Hong Kong. So Hong Kongese can buy RMB-denominated bonds. And by the end of this year, Hong Kongese can use RMB for direct investment in mainland China. This policy means that they can earn a higher return by holding RMB. The first step, using RMB as a settlement currency means that non-residents can get hold of RMB. then you pay higher return for their holding RMB. And this is the policy we have adopted. I don't think along this line China can go very far. As we mentioned, we cannot meet those preconditions for internationalization of RMB. I think is that accompanying the growth of a Chinese economy, inevitably RMB will be regionalized and maybe eventually internationalized. I don't know. For example, Deutsche Mark is not internationalized; it's regionalized. It become part of Euro. So what will be the fate of RMB? I think it's still difficult to say. Depends on whether there will be progress in regional financial cooperation. If we cannot really come together to create Asian currency, then perhaps Chinese yuan will be internationalized. But it will take decades. Maybe in my lifetime, I cannot see that. I don't know. So I think China should, at this moment, to deal with those imbalances head on, and not just evade to take really a hard decision. And those hard decisions has to be taken. We can't evade those problems. And so if we fail to change the roadmap adequately, RMB internationalization, I don't think we can go very far.
Well, I think I want to keep this morning session a little more, but we have a time limit here. We have to start here. Thank you very much for your very active participation, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
It was very fruitful and productive morning lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.